Most of you have probably heard jokes about homeschoolers. These jokes can be harmful, and my opponent hopes to perpetuate these stereotypes by cheapening the value of homeschooling. Although traditional schooling has its merits, it's not inherently better than homeschooling. Today I intend to prove to you that homeschooling is just as important to a child's development as traditional schooling is. So first I will go over my opponent's objects that she laid out. Next, I will redefine the criteria, and finally I will provide you with key points that prove my argument. Now that I've given you the outline of this debate, I will proceed to go over the definitions of the objects that will be compared. So first, I agree with my fellow debaters' definition of traditional schooling as any classroom-based curriculum in either public or private school. Also, I mostly agree with her definition of homeschooling as a home-based education, as a home-based curriculum that's provided by a parent. However, it's important to point out that not all homeschoolers rely solely on their parents' teachings. In the article Homeschooling, What Do We Know and What Do We Need to Learn by Nancy Eisenberg and her fellow researchers from 2022, it's explained how many homeschoolers use co-ops to supplement the teachings they receive from their parents. I've now gone over the terms and will cover the criteria for the debate. First off, I accept my opponent's criteria of social development because it is a key part of a child's development and allows them to gauge well with others. That's why I consider this to be an important factor of the debate. Also, it is crucial that students get high quality education no matter what type of school they're in, because it will help them throughout their lives. That is why this is also an important factor in this debate. Finally, I agree with the opposition's criteria that a student needs to have a break from the pressure to succeed in academics. Now I will refute my opponent's argument since I've examined the criteria. In my adversary's argument, she made several claims that can be easily rebutted using my quality research and some own personal experiences. So the first harmful assertion that my opponent made is that traditional schooling allows students to receive more socialization than homeschoolers. This claim is not completely representative of the situation, however. The ratio of socialization between homeschoolers and non-homeschoolers is a lot more complex. In the book, The Wiley Handbook of Home Education from 2016, researcher Robert Koonsman explains how both sides of this debate have different ideas of what socialization means, which means that a homeschooler's concept of experiencing adequate social interaction can be a lot different than a traditional schooler's. So I know in my own experience, I played on a public school soccer team, and a lot of my teammates would ask me, like, how do you get interaction? Like, how do you meet people and stuff? And they thought I wouldn't be very socially interactive because I wasn't with my friends every day for the school day for a certain amount of hours. But I felt like I received an adequate amount of interaction with other people and feel like I can socially interact with others. So that, because of this difference in perspective, it cannot be claimed with absolute certainty that students who attend traditional schools receive better social interaction than homeschoolers. My opponent also falsely claimed that traditional schoolers have better education than homeschoolers. Homeschoolers actually receive a higher quality education that allows them to do better than traditional students in tests and in college. In her dissertation, The Impact of Educational Backgrounds on Academic Success at a Private Work College in the Midwest from 2016, Nicole Vaught gives data that shows how homeschoolers have higher ACT scores and higher college GPAs on average when compared to private or public schoolers. These numbers disprove my opponent's argument that traditional schoolers have a better education. Instead, it can be reasonably inferred that since homeschoolers are getting better grades and doing better in college, that they actually received a better education. Therefore, my claim that homeschoolers gain better education is accurate. Finally, the advocate argued that traditional schooling is better than homeschooling because it allows for a supposed healthy separation of school and home life. However, just because someone is homeschooled does not mean they cannot tell the difference between school activities from everyday living, especially when interacting with their parents. Instead of driving a red wedge between family relationships, homeschooling can actually draw families closer, and it can benefit both the students and parents. Therefore, I disagree with the advocate because she makes it seem like homeschoolers suffer just because they were schooled in their home. So, Andre Belanova and her fellow researchers surveyed homeschoolers and their parents in their 2021 article titled The Gift of Homeschooling, Adult Homeschool Graduates and Their Parents Conceptualize Homeschooling in North Carolina. So their research showed that both homeschoolers and their parents felt that they were more connected with each other because they were homeschooled. Also, that article explained how homeschoolers were taught the joy of learning, which is very important for them when they're studying and stuff like that. So this research shows clearly that just because a child is doing their schoolwork at home does not mean their familial relations will be impeded. Also, since homeschoolers have been raised to find enjoyment in school, they will not be as stressed by their homework since they are happy to do it. Since I've refuted my opponent with several arguments, I will now conclude my debate. I'm confident that I've showed you that homeschooling is just as effective as traditional schooling for a child's development. I went over the terms the advocate laid out, then reviewed the criteria, and finally provided you with important arguments of my own. Although homeschooling is different than traditional schooling, it does not mean it is worse. I hope to show you that homeschooling has its merits and is not fundamentally inferior to the traditional style of schooling.